Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you for joining us here on the program. We have a very fascinating program. I think you're going to enjoy this. It's for everybody, including yours truly. You talk about a therapy session. Well, today is going to be just another one of those great therapy sessions, as I like to call my programs here on Tell Me Your Story, where we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true with our special guest here on the program. Her name is Dr. Amy Saltzman, MD, and she is with us here to talk about the work that she is doing regarding mindfulness for not just athletes, but all kinds of folks, peak performance and finding flow in sports and life. It's a still small place. And in this case, the book I have in front of me is for athletes. Dr. Amy, thank you so much for joining us here on the program. It's really a pleasure to have you here. And I'm looking forward to, as I hope our listeners are, of learning an awful lot from you.
So happy to be with you.
Now, first of all, just the title and your website is also a still quiet place, correct?
So it's actually Still Quiet Place, no A, just in case.
So
stillquietplace.com.
.com. Excellent. And we will be linked to your website as well. I always like to let both the guest as well as our listeners know that they can go to your website, stillquietplace.com, to find out more. We talk about that all the time. One of our slogans here is encouraging people to participate in the Decade of Perfect Vision, the 2020s, where we encourage people to go within to that still, quiet place to calm down, to relax, to find some peace and tranquility, even if it's just for, as one of my guests said, even if it's just for 60 seconds, and listen to that still, small voice. How did this concept come to you?
Well, I had been teaching mindfulness to adults. I started by teaching mindfulness to adults with chronic pain and chronic illness when I was in my residency. And then when my kids were born, I started teaching to parents. And then one day, sitting on the floor in the hallway, my son became upset because I'd said no about something, and without ever really knowing what I was about to start, I said, would you like to do a feelings meditation? And he said yes, and I guided him through a practice for getting in touch with your feelings, which helps children and adults have their feelings without their feelings having them. And thus began my teaching of mindfulness to children 3 and up. So I now say I teach mindfulness to children from 3 to 93. And I wanted to translate mindfulness and the idea of pure awareness into something that kids could understand.
Well, there's only one fly in the ointment as far as I see it. And you're asking guys to show their feelings? That is so contrary to what our stereotypical world. I'm not supposed to show my feelings, Amy.
Well, you have the choice of whether you're going to show your feelings or not, but your feelings are there. And if you can bring some kind and curious attention to your feelings, then you will have a lot more choice about whether you show them, when you show them, how you show them. But if we, and I don't think it's just guys, but if we pretend that our feelings aren't there, or we magnify them in a way that like we're kind of overwhelmed by them, neither one of those habits is particularly helpful. And so again, learning to have your feelings, be aware of your feelings without your feelings having you, without your feelings driving what you say and do kind of automatically, and without your feelings driving your physiology, can be super helpful.
And that is a big one right there, because we do tend to get stuck, if you will, in our emotions many times. I mean, a case in point for me was in 1999, I stand corrected, 1998, I was served. Interestingly enough, it was actually on the first day of May, which kind of gave a whole new meaning to the phrase May Day. I was served with divorce papers. And I was a basket case for a month. Now, I'm an intelligent guy. I work an awful lot in my logical brain. Couldn't find it for a month. And it wasn't until we got to the 1st, 2nd of June, I came out of that fog and I'm going, wait a minute, hold the phone. So it's easy to get stuck. And for some people, it can be for months or even years for that matter, maybe even their entire lifetime.
Yeah, and I think we want to have compassion for those moments of intensity. There are things that definitely rock our world. And even with extensive mindfulness practice, there are things that can kind of throw us for a loop. And that's a place where maybe you're not able to quite master having your feelings without your feelings having you, and then you can bring some compassion to those moments.
For anybody who is struggling with this aspect of their emotions, what are some of the early steps that one can take from your experience in your practice to make that shift?
Well, I think it's a little bit what you pointed to before, like often just making some time and space to allow the feelings to move through can be helpful. All of my books and CDs contain a befriending feelings practice, which is basically sitting, breathing, saying hello to the feeling that's present, actually feeling how the feeling feels in your body. Is it warm, is it cool, big, small, moving, still? Being a little bit playful with it and noticing or imagining if the feeling has a color or colors, and a sound or sounds, and then sometimes asking the feeling what it wants or needs from you. And if it's something you can't provide, then maybe having a dialogue with the feeling about what you can provide. And journaling, writing music, for some people exercising. But most of us are so busy or so much externally directed, like on our screens, that often just making some time to be real with ourselves and check in with ourselves is a healthy first step.
Well, I have to say that in my own personal experience over the years, I have been around a whopping 61, just a flicker in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, I have watched others get stuck. I have even been asked to, and this was kind of the way that it was phrased. I need you to be my tether, okay? Because I tend to float away in terms of, going off maybe emotionally. Although this person also feels as though they're sort of caught between two worlds, this one and the next, whatever that is for them. And they say, I need you to make sure that I don't float away and disappear somewhere. And I have to say that particular role in this case, I'm willing to do, because I don't want the person to float away, and I want them to kind of stay here with us in that respect. But at the same time, don't we often get into what they call codependent situations where we take on a role like that, and then we think that, well, I need to keep doing this. This person is going through other things now, and I need to keep doing this. And we darn near sacrifice ourselves, don't we?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple things, and being in touch with our feelings can actually help us discern when it's wise and healthy to serve as someone's tether, for both parties, and when perhaps it's not so wise and you want to get that person's support so that they have their own tether.
Mm.
and they can establish their own tether, and they can learn to befriend their own feelings and make their own choices. And there's a time and a place to ask for help. There's a time and a place to provide help or support or friendship or just presence. And there are times and ways where we're enacting patterns that aren't so healthy. And so sitting with ourselves and listening, as you said, to that still small voice lets us discern, is this healthy for me? Is it healthy for the other person? Is it healthy overall? Or is it recreating patterns that aren't so beneficial?
We're talking with Amy Saltzman, and she has a website. It's called stillquietplace.com. We encourage you to go there. I also want to talk about the various books that you have available. In this case, in front of me is Still Quiet Place for Athletes, and we will talk about that and those other realms as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and I'm your host, and we are talking with Dr. Amy Saltzman, and we're talking about going into that still, quiet place so that we can find some equilibrium, so we can find some peace of mind. Mindfulness is a huge element. You said that that's kind of how you started with mindfulness, and it took me a while. I actually had to have numerous guests explain to me what mindfulness is. I don't want to say was because it's present tense. And I'm very curious as to your definition based on experience of what mindfulness has, because some people mindfulness meditation and so forth, which seems contrary because I first learned about meditation, you got to quiet the mind. Well, how can you have mindfulness meditation if you're supposed to quiet the mind? So explain to us a little bit about your perspectives, your definition, if you will, of mindfulness.
Yeah, so hopefully my definition will be pretty simple and graspable. And it's because I do want to share these practices with children. I don't think we need to be 40 and getting divorced or have a heart attack before we learn these skills. So my definition of mindfulness is, and I'm going to give you the whole definition and then I'm going to break it down into pieces. So
Okay.
my definition is mindfulness is paying attention here and now with kindness and curiosity so that we can choose our behavior. So if we break it down, here and now means doing our best to be in the present moment and not obsessing about the past or worrying or fantasizing about the future. With kindness and curiosity is the attitude that we bring to ourselves and to our circumstances, because otherwise often we're beating ourselves up or looking for problems. And when I pay attention to myself, to my breath, to my body, to my thoughts, to my feelings, and I pay attention to those around me and the circumstances, then I have all the information that I need to choose my behavior. So by taking that time to listen within and befriend myself, I'm much more likely to be able to respond rather than react when things are difficult.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you put it that way because that is what we tend to do is we react to act again and again the same way, react to whatever the stimuli is that has come our way. And that can be a very frustrating circumstance for a lot of folks because it's like, I don't understand. Why am I doing this again? It's like I said the last time this happened, I would never let this happen again. And here it is again. And I will tell you that someone keeps reminding me of this, and I'd love for you to expound on what I just said, but also this. And they said it in a loving and kind way. They said, Richard, you wrote this script. This is your movie. And it's like, what? No, 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 no. And yet, well, hey, we create our own reality. I talk about choices and knowledge of those choices, and then all of the choices I've made up to this point have put me where I am. So now I have to figure out, okay, how do I make totally different Einsteinian choices? Not, not to get into insanity here, so that I don't do this again. And it seems like it's so hard, Dr. Amy.
I mean, it's a challenge, especially if we're 58 or 61. Like, we have some ingrained habits, and we can have compassion and maybe even a sense of humor about that. And there's this beautiful poem called The Autobiography in Five Short Chapters. And I'm going to paraphrase it here, but basically, there's a hole in the middle of the street, and the author falls into the hole, doesn't know that she's there, it's not her fault, she can't get out. And in the 5 chapters it goes through, then she falls in, and she knows where she is, but she can't get out. Then she falls in, and gets out quickly. Then she sees it, but still falls in. And then finally, she walks down a different street. So, what I tell people is, often we can't even see the different street. But if you know that you're repeating a pattern and you're like, I'm doing it again, at least sit down and don't keep walking, or don't stand on the precipice of the hole. Like, and if you sit down, and especially if it's a dance between you and another person, if you don't do your part of the dance, and I know I'm mixing analogies here,
It's okay.
then the whole dance changes, right? If you sit down and you don't go into the hole with another person that you're involved with, then they're in the hole alone. But I had this woman in one of my parenting classes, and she would say, like, sometimes I can't find the different street. And I said, that's fine. You don't need to find a different street. Like, just sit down on the sidewalk and stop walking towards the hole. And, maybe when you sit down on the sidewalk, you'll see another path, but at least you won't be in the old familiar hole. And then the whole pattern, if it's a pattern in a partnership, whether it's a romantic partnership or a business partnership or an athletic team, if even one person changes the pattern, then the whole pattern starts to shift.
And that's my understanding of the dynamics, especially when it comes to relationships, is that, and we've talked about this before on the program, that when there's an old saying that says you can't change other people. You can't change other people. And what I have found is that isn't true. Now, when I say that, and I'll explain this, you can't change other people intentionally. Okay. In other words, your goal cannot be to change the other person. Now, you hear the phrase from especially women, I'm going to change him and make him the way I want him to be for me. No, no, no. By virtue of you going through your own personal growth and you changing, like you said, sitting down on the sidewalk instead of continuing to walk toward the hole, you have just changed. And so then the people around you are going to notice this change, and either A, they're going to say, oh, this is interesting. This person is doing something different. I'm going to hang around and see what's happening. And I don't know, maybe I can help or learn something from this person, etc. And then there are going to be others who are going to say, oh my God, I got to get as far away. I can't deal with this. No way. And I'm out of here. And they disappear. You've changed them, but you've not done it with the intent of doing it. It's just something that naturally happens.
No, what's happened is you've responded, and hopefully you've responded as skillfully and gracefully and wisely as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have the choice to either react or respond to you.
Mm-hmm.
And the cycle continues. And if you keep responding and they keep reacting, it's going to have one outcome. If you respond and they react and then you react, that's going to have a different outcome. That's probably headed towards the same hole you always fall in. If you respond and they respond, then you're in a whole new dynamic.
Yeah. So in essence, you have changed the dynamic by your own new choices, by your own responses as opposed to reactions, your own actions as opposed to reactions. Very, very interesting stuff. Dr. Amy Saltzman, MD, is our guest here on the program, and we are talking about A Still Quiet Place. So I'm going to get a read from you on the various books in this regard. A Still Quiet Place and stillquietplace.com is the website as we continue talking here on Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world as we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And we're here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesday mornings at 9 a.m. That's our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. And we podcast these programs as well at SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio as well, and many other locations. And you can watch these interviews on YouTube. The YouTube channel is Tell Me Your Story, Richard Dugan, and you can watch these interviews. And of course, as I said before, we will be linked to Dr. Amy Saltzman's website, which is stillsmallvoice.com.
Stillquietplace.com.
I'm sorry, what am I thinking? Still small. I'll start that one. Stillsmallvoice.com will be mine. Still Quiet Place is her website. Stillquietplace.com. I have too many phrases rolling around in my head. Tell me about the series of books that you have. A Still Quiet Place 4. What's the breakdown? Is it kind of what you described at the front end of the program?
Well, there's 3 books, A Still Quiet Place, a mindfulness program for teaching children and adolescents to ease stress and difficult emotions. And that's for parents, teachers, counselors who want to share mindfulness with youth. The next one is A Still Quiet Place for teens, mindfulness skills for easing stress and difficult emotions. And the last one is A Still Quiet Place for athletes, mindfulness skills for achieving peak performance and finding flow in sports and in life. And I want to emphasize on this program, both that I love working with athletes and the in life piece, because I use the same curriculum if I'm working with individual athletes or CEOs, or if I'm working with athletic teams or business teams and kind of everything in between. So while the lens is sports, the skills definitely apply to all walks of life, from parenting to business to sports.
So, sort of answers my next question, that you could take specifically the one for athletes, even if you're not an athlete, and it will benefit you, as opposed to the one for children and parents and so forth, because that sounds like it probably is more geared towards that particular group of folks. Or will all 3 books, regardless of which one you pick up, be useful? I mean, I have no children and I'm not an athlete, but if I didn't pick up the one for athletes, but I picked up the other 2, would that be
Well,
good?
I think if you want to use it for your personal use, the 2 that would be most useful are either the teens book or the athletes book.
Okay.
And if you're a musician, if you're an artist, if you're a dancer, if you're a business person, again, if you're a parent, for all those roles, the information in the athletes book is beneficial. The athletes book is my last book, and so I feel like it's the most complete.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's probably the most useful. And just substitute, music for athletic performance, and if that's your thing, and you'll be fine.
Yeah. What is it about this work that you do with people, and athletes in particular, certainly, but just in general, the various clientele that you have, the clients that you facilitate, if you will? What is it about this work that intrigues you so much that you've been doing it for as long as you have?
Well, my purposes are preventing and relieving suffering, enhancing health and well-being, and helping people find joy and flow in the midst of the chaos of daily life. And that you get to decide how, what your joy and what your flow is. But I want to give people the skills to live the most joyful and fulfilling lives that they can.
Well, we are greatly appreciative of the work that you are doing, as well as others that we've had on this program to do just that. And I also know, too, that some statistics are starting to come out that we are, if not in it, if we're not heading toward it, we're already in what would be considered the second pandemic. And I'm not talking about a new wave here. I'm talking about a whole different pandemic on the mental health scale, if you will, and realm. Talk to us about, it may seem obvious, but maybe not so much to some folks. How did we get here, and how do we get out the other end of the tunnel where there's light?
Well, I think there's a couple things. So I want to talk for a minute about the data. So the data for mindfulness shows that it decreases anxiety, depression, stress, and enhances empathy, efficacy. It prevents burnout and compassion fatigue. So, all of those things are relevant to the pandemic. And my sense is that how we get out is both being, compassionately being where we are, practicing truly excellent self-care, and being of service and helping others. And I think there's a little bit of, I'm not sure that it's going to go back to normal. And so again, this skill of being where we are, accepting the moment as it is, and then being able to choose wisely our next steps is super important.
Well, I know people have been using the phrase on a regular basis about going back to the new normal. I understand what they mean by that. I just say, we're just going to continue to move forward into whatever normal becomes, kind of thing.
Right.
And it's interesting how, on an energetic level, this has affected people. We went through, ostensibly, even though it hadn't officially started, we went through an election cycle during this pandemic. And we've been, our educational system has been adversely, in one sense, adversely affected, although there are others who have found ways of continuing to learn. Our medical infrastructure has been strained to the breaking point. There are people who were in the medical field, especially in the ER and trauma centers. They've thrown up their hands and walked away saying, I can't do this anymore. This is too damn hard. And I get it. I absolutely I understand it from an intellectual level. I've been one of the few fortunate ones that I've been able to continue working straight through, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't affected me in some capacity, because I'm dealing with, like everybody else, I got to carry a mask with me everywhere I go, and I got to put it on when I go in, and I'll take it off when I get out, and yet I still try to get out and get some exercise. I try to get out and take my walks if I can, because that's very important. I think one of the things that I thought was real interesting when everybody was being told to stay home, everybody thought it was stay inside. Nobody said you had to stay inside. You go out in your backyard, your front yard, just
right.
Keep your distance, kind of thing. And I think that if better clarification were made, and I'm not speaking specifically to the pandemic, but just in general when we're talking about giving people guidelines to follow for their safety, as well as their better physical, mental, and emotional health. I think it needs to be spelled out. Do you think maybe that's part of the problem, is that there have been very few specifics on self-care during this time, other than the big three, as I used to phrase it: wash up, mask up, and step back.
Yeah, I think that was definitely, you know, those are the most important instructions for our physical health.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I don't know that the people who were giving pandemic instructions were thinking beyond that to our mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And, um, I think it's important that people know what fills them up in terms of emotional and spiritual health. And it can, again, be playing music or exercise or sitting in your backyard or taking a walk with a friend. But knowing those things that you find sustaining and meaningful, mindfulness, prayer, uh, you know, whatever helps you connect both internally to the stillness and quietness within, and to helps you connect externally to whatever you believe in as well. Those are important practices. And when people were in survival mode at the beginning of the pandemic and figuring out how to work from home and how to help their kids at home who were being, going to school on Zoom, I think some of those things got lost. And I'm hoping that most people now are finding little ways, like you said, even the 60 seconds of breathing and checking in with yourself to take care of themselves.
Well, it's interesting how this process has begun. I mean, I was concerned when they said, "Yeah, we have a pandemic, a global pandemic, and so forth, and here's what you need to do." And I was concerned. I wasn't fearful, and not because people were saying, "Oh, it's just like the flu" or anything. I just didn't have that internal sense that this is something that I need to be afraid of. I don't need the fear. Okay, concern. Okay, is important. That's very valid, but I didn't feel fearful. What I actually felt was rather optimistic because we were doing something different this time. Every time the influenza rolls around, it's business as usual. Even after we got the vaccine for the flu, the flu shot. Everybody's supposed to get that. But the other part of it was, I thought there are going to be some opportunities that we don't even know about yet. This was back in March and April of 2020, that are going to come about because of this. And it's similar to what you described. I mean, I never did video editing before. Now I have over 200 videos up on YouTube in just a year and a half. And I'm doing video editing. So I've expanded my toolbox, if you will. I've added some more tools. Other people started small businesses, whether it was to make masks and other PPI, I guess is how it is, protective clothing for medical personnel, because they were running short and so forth. And I know that is not going to go on forever, and so on and so forth. But other people came up with ways of helping one another. What really astounded me, Dr. Amy, was how the food industry, whether it's the hospitality industry or just the providers, came out of the woodwork in many, many cases to support those in neighborhoods and communities who couldn't get out, who, were in need. And it's like, really, there's a food shortage? I don't think so, Tim. There's more than enough to go around. It's really the problem of distribution. And the distribution, it just, in one sense, it kind of went crazy. And it was great. You saw mankind taking care of its own instead of eating its own, as seems to have been the case in certain realms. We won't go there. What is it about how do I phrase this? What is it about those kinds of challenges, whether it's a pandemic, a hurricane, an earthquake, fire, et cetera, that fosters that kind of human kindness that for whatever reason isn't there when there is no big challenge that we face?
Well, I think those challenges demand that we reset our priorities. And, there is a way where the pandemic has us looking at our mortality, and it's like that helps us consider what really matters and who do I want to be and how do I want to show up in the world. And I think the other element of a truly global pandemic is that there are elements of compassion and self-compassion that are based on what's called common humanity, which means understanding that you are and I am and everyone else is a human being who has joy and sorrow and dreams and fears. And when we remember our common humanity, we can be kinder to ourselves and kinder to other people.
Well, the other element of it too, and this kind of goes to sharing our feelings and expressing our feelings and the stereotypes and so forth. And what I find fascinating is how some people cannot seem to express what they need. It's always some kind of cryptic thing. I mean, especially when you talk about the dynamics, let's say in a two-party relationship, where, one of them makes this cryptic comment about wanting to be loved. Maybe that's the way it's put. And the other person says, yeah. And in their mind, they're going, so what do you need? What do you want me to do? All you're saying is you want to be loved, and I've been doing everything I know to do, so now what? What do I do? Instead of saying, I need you to hold me. I need you to just let me rest my head on your shoulder, maybe let me cry on your shoulder, et cetera, et cetera. But they make it cryptic, and then the dynamic almost starts to spin out of control.
Well, I think there's in all of the books, there's a mindfulness communication practice. And the mindfulness communication practice involves for each individual, and right, we've already talked about we can't make someone else do this, but if I'm having a difficult communication, or if I know I'm probably going to have a difficult communication, I will usually stop. I will check in with myself. What am I feeling? What do I want? What do I need? We're usually pretty good about that. Sometimes we're not completely honest with ourselves about what we feel and want and need. The step that we're not usually so great about is stepping into the other person's shoes. So once I've checked in with myself, I want to step completely out of my shoes and step into the other person's shoes. And I want to listen also maybe underneath the words for what do they feel, what do they want, and what do they need. And if I'm in dialogue with someone, we'll come back to that in a minute. But if I'm just doing it by myself, then once I've made my best understanding of what I want, what I feel and want and need, and what the other person feels and wants and needs, then I can look at solutions. And specifically, I want to look at solutions, going back to our earlier conversation, that are maybe different than solutions I've tried in the past. Now, if I'm in dialogue with someone, and especially if it's a heated dialogue, I can say, look, this has been heated. It's been a point of contention. And I really want to hear you. If that's true, I really want to understand you. I really want to work this out with you. Again, only if it's true. And I want to hear how you feel and what you want and what you need. And if you are in dialogue with that intention and the person isn't being clear, or it's not clear to you, you can say, okay, I hear that you want to be loved. In this moment, what would that look like? So if it's not clear, like, it's also super common for people to say, like, if someone says something that they feel is clear, but you feel isn't, rather than saying that's not clear, you can say, that's not clear to me. What do you want or need in this moment? And just because you mentioned it before, you want to make sure that in these settings that you're not repeating codependent patterns.
Mm.
Right?
And that's
Because
critical.
if the person wants to be loved, there is a way where we see love as between two people, but also, what is the person doing to be loving to themselves? What is the person doing to be loving to you? Right? Like, that request that you were talking about may be unidirectional when really it should be tri-directional. The person can for sure ask for love, and you can check in with yourself and see if it feels healthy to give what they're asking, that they're calling love. You can also inquire then, are you willing to love me? And, this is what love looks like and feels like to me in this moment. And then both of you would want to be looking at what are you doing to be loving to your individual selves, so that you're taking responsibility for some of that.
And I know that a lot of this is not an easy thing to do for some folks, because in some instances they've been, the only word I can come up with is they've been trapped in this situation for a long period of time, and they're not 100% certain that if I do this, it's going to help to, calm things down and maybe even resolve the situation. And that's a challenge for folks. We put up the shields, as I like to say. We put up the walls, or the shields, if you will, in an effort to protect ourselves from getting hurt. But at the same time, there is a time and a place, isn't there, for being vulnerable? In other words, you're trying to resolve this drama. You're trying to not necessarily bring it to a happily ever after scenario, but at least to bring down the energy and the volatility, shall we say.
Well, so it's interesting because I feel like there's a time and a place for everything. And mindfulness is being able to wisely choose in each moment what you're doing. So there's a time and a place for really healthy, clear boundaries. There's a time and a place for I was teaching last night to a group of athletes and some coaches, and one of the coaches said that he often walks into a situation with a wall up, and that's kind of his default. And I said, well, let's look at that. Like, you have the opportunity to maybe remove a brick on the wall, or a layer of bricks on the wall, or maybe in a certain, like in your family or with a partner, maybe you want to take down the whole wall, or maybe you actually want to add some bricks. And mindfulness to me is, given the circumstances, making the wise choice about what's needed in the moment. So sometimes vulnerability is definitely called for. Sometimes vulnerability is really unwise and unhealthy. So you want to discern. And one of the interesting things I found is, often my first instinct, I then I need to almost do the opposite. So if taking this coach again, his default is to walk in with his wall up. So he's been playing with over the last 6 weeks, coming in with his wall down. I, on the other hand, am pretty much historically have been a wall down type of person. And I'm finding that putting a wall, even if it's just a little 1 foot garden wall up occasionally, or like a true full 6 foot high wall, that there's times and places for that. And so if you know your default, then you probably want to lean towards what's not so natural to you. And we all have tendencies.
Well, I have to say that what you've just shared is extremely important for a lot of us. A lot of us who go through. I mean, I wish that I could have done the same thing during the process of my first divorce, because I don't think it would have gone on as long. But one of the things that my former wife said to me in the early days of the process was, well, you promised to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. To which I responded, all those promises went out the window when you got a lawyer. I mean, that's just where I was coming from. But I had an attorney who, it was interesting. She had a male attorney. I had a female attorney. And my attorney's slogan, which I absolutely love, and I wish she had stayed in the business, but she just couldn't do it anymore. Too much. It was just too volatile for her to deal with, I think, energetically. But her slogan was reasonable solutions for reasonable people. And I was trying to be reasonable. And the irony was, when I had the consultation with her and I laid out the 4 elements that I was willing to put forth to bring this thing to a quick end, she said, "Yeah, that looks good. That looks very good. I think that will work just fine." And 8 months later, after $3,600 spent on my part, they accepted those 4 elements. And I should have added, and if you accept the 4 elements that I have proposed, at the end of all of this, you're going to pay my attorney's fees. And I thought, nah, I'm not going to go there. But anyway, Dr. Amy Saltzman's my guest here on Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I really do appreciate the fact that you folks are with us here and sharing this time with us. And Dr. Amy, this is quite honestly, and maybe I'm wrong, but quite honestly, this seems to me to be a lot of very, very, shall we say, textbook kind of stuff that we need to be aware of here in our time, because this whole situation is not going to be changing anytime in the near future, at least as far as the dynamics that are out there. And it may be because of the pandemic and all of the things, the stressors that we've been under. Stress undermines us in so many different ways. And obviously mindfulness can certainly relieve a lot of that. I often talk about how nature is our greatest teacher, and yeah, it's great to be out in nature and to commune with nature, whether it's the fauna or the flora, whichever you choose. But I don't think that replaces spending time in a particular, I want to put it this way, in a particular practice like mindfulness, right?
Yeah, ideally you could do both. So, if you can do your mindfulness practice out at the beach or in your backyard, then it's a 2 for 1. And but there is value in whether it's a minute or 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 30 minutes of time just to be with yourself and to give yourself the space to know. And again, whether you're an athlete or not, like, how's my body today? How's my mind today? How's my heart today? How's my connection with myself? How's my connection with others? How's my connection with something greater, whatever that is? And if you sit down and your mind is busy, then you have compassion about that. If you sit down and your body's fidgety, you have compassion about that. If you sit down and your heart is heavy, then you have compassion about that. And then usually, if you've given yourself that time, you are less likely to be reactive in your day-to-day life. And just like stress and difficulty can snowball, joy and peace can snowball. So if I sit in the morning and take some time for myself, then I'm less likely to have a nasty interaction with my plumber. And if I don't have the nasty interaction with my plumber, then I'm less likely to have, be short with a patient or a client. And then if that doesn't happen, then when I get home, I'm less likely to be short with my family. And so, in the same way stress can build, peace can build.
Well, I'm excited about the prospects for the future with people like you at the helm, so to speak, or at least who are there available. The other key, though, is that an individual has to want the help. They have to get to that place where, yeah, I've gone as far as I can go on my own, and now I'm going to need somebody, in a manner of speaking, again, to avoid codependent relationships here, to hold my hand or to guide me forward. Not feeding me information necessarily, but just saying, okay, all right, here's what we're going to do, and you're going to do the work, all right? And I will be here, right along with you, but you are the one that's going to have to do the work.
Well, and obviously it's a lot of what I do. There's definitely a time and a place to get a skilled professional to support yourself, to support a loved one. And there's a place to say, I love you. I want to support you. The way our dynamic is right now, I'm not able to do that. And the most loving thing I can do is say that you or we need to get support from someone else because this isn't healthy.
But there's also the problem there in that kind of conversation with the other person saying, oh, but I don't need the help. You're the one that needs the help. Deflecting, basically.
Well, and you can say, great, we both need help, and here, let's do it together.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you happen to be here in Santa Barbara where we broadcast from, correct?
I am.
But you also do work with people outside the area.
Anywhere via this lovely Zoom platform.
It really is a lovely Zoom platform, and I am grateful that it is here and that we are able to connect in this regard. It's just fabulous how life is the way that it is. It's dynamic. I would hate for it to be static, although I will tell you that there are moments when I wish there was a little bit of short-term stability, if you will, because it just seems like nowadays, and I'm not sure if this is something that you have experienced personally or through your clients, does it seem as though here we are, the latter portion of 2021, going into the new year 2022, which, by the way, I love the fact that deuces are wild next year. I'm sure that phrase is going to be used so much by so many people, that it sort of feels a little bit like the wheels are coming off the cart.
I think it's super individual. I mean, of course, because I'm in a helping profession, I tend to see folks whose wheels are coming off the cart or who have the wisdom to know that they might, and they want to be proactive in preventing the wheels from coming off the cart, or they just want to enhance their experience of joy and flow. And, I serve all those people from wheels off to wheels on, and how can I get the most out of this wild ride? And all of the skills that we've been talking about apply to all of those settings. So again, mindfulness has been shown to decrease anxiety and depression, to increase sense of purpose and meaning, and to increase the experience of joy and flow. So wherever you find yourself along that continuum, mindfulness is beneficial to supporting you.
This is Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. We're talking with Dr. Amy Saltzman, and she has a series of books, 3 books. That's a series. It's not a trilogy, ladies and gentlemen, but it is 3 different books, and it's A Still, Quiet Place 4, and in this case, I have in front of me the one on athletes, and I should be going through that as well. And of course, all 3 books are dealing with mindfulness skills as well for achieving a peak performance and finding flow in sports and life. And sports is sometimes a part of someone's life. Matter of fact, when you were talking a little bit about that, I kept thinking, well, we're all athletes, maybe not physically, but this is a marathon. And there is no end until we choose or until we leave this earth. I myself am hoping that the mothership will come and take me away. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to escape the dynamics of life as we know it. It could be worse than I ever thought, but it would be different. And that's one of the things that I said when the pandemic was called and they decided to shut things down. I said, we're doing something different. That means that when we get to the end of this, it's going to be different. It's going to be. Now, whether we like it or not, that's a whole nother conversation. But the reality is that it's going to be different. And speaking of which, maybe some of you who are watching the YouTube video, those of you who are not, aren't going to know about this. I'm going to actually swing around here, and I'm going to show you folks on YouTube the scene that you're looking at is a beautiful lake and a Kildare Abbey that is in County Galway in Connemara in Ireland, where I was in 2004. And that is a place where, on the one hand, Dr. Amy, I would say, if I could just get there, all my problems would be solved. But I know, you and I both know, and I want you to elaborate on this, my problems go with me wherever I go until I deal with them.
Yeah, well, the father of modern mindfulness, at least in the US, is John Kabat-Zinn, and he has a book titled Wherever You Go, There You Are.
Yeah.
And yes, our stillness and our thinking and our feeling, our habits and our possibilities go with us wherever we are.
Well, I am grateful for your appearance here on this program and glad that we've had this therapy session as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I do appreciate the work that you are doing, the books that you have available. You've got some video. Matter of fact, I was looking at one of the videos up on your website. You're actually doing some movement, you're doing some exercises, but I think that's more geared towards keeping moving. Yes, it's okay, as you described earlier in the program, to sit on the side of the road and stop walking towards the hole. That's important. But when we're going through the challenges that we do in our lives that are stressing us, and I think I've heard you say this on more than one occasion, we as individuals, we have to take care of self. Not in a selfish way, but just in a healthy way, right? Would you consider that to say be rule number 1 when dealing with life's stressors?
Yeah, I mean, it's the adage of put your oxygen mask on first, or fill your cup so you can overflow to others. When we practice self-care, then we have the reserves to care for and serve others. And when we practice self-care, again, we're less likely to be reactive and more likely to be responsive. And that's healthier for everyone involved.
Well, again, my thanks to you for being a part of the program here on Tell Me Your Story. I do have three final questions I like to ask all of my guests here on the program, which I will address to you in just a moment. But I want to remind you that you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. The program is here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., as well as on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. That is our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. And we stream live at those times at richarddugan.com. We are podcasting at SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations on the internet. And we are also on YouTube where you can watch these interviews. And you can do that at Tell Me Your Story. Just look for the guy with the hat, okay? Just look for that guy, because there is another Tell Me Your Story channel up on YouTube. Not the same, folks. You got to go to the right one. The banner on our channel page is The Decade, 2020's The Decade of Perfect Vision. And we hope that you will participate in that by going within to that still quiet place. And stillquietplace.com is our guest's website, Dr. Amy Saltzman. We also hope that if you can support us financially, we would really appreciate that. We have a PayPal account for your security as well as ours. Just to put in my email address when you go to send, it's richard@richarddugan.com. That's richard@richarddugan.com. With that, I love this part of the program, especially when we have returning guests. And I hope that we will have you back again to talk about more of the work that you're doing, working with folks as we continue moving through this period of time in our history, as we create that history. But first of all, let me ask you, who is Amy Saltzman?
First, Amy Saltzman is a human being with deep spiritual practice. And then my roles are holistic physician, mindfulness coach, author, wife, mother, friend, and yeah.
What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you are doing now?
Yeah, I think I hope I answered that one already, but I'll say it again. Preventing and relieving suffering, enhancing health and well-being, and supporting people in finding joy and flow in the midst of the chaos of daily life.
And at the risk of being redundant, what is your life's purpose?
That would be... No, I'll give you a new answer for that. It's okay. To live and express the love that I am.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Amy Saltzman, I thank you once again. Stillquietplace.com is the website, and A Still Quiet Place 4. She's 3 books out there. We certainly hope that you will go to her website and find out more about the work that she is doing. And again, we thank you for joining us here on the program. And we thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, as we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to love.